5, 4, 3.
The Mac Observer's Mac Geek Gab, episode 820 from Monday, June 22nd, 2020.
Folks, and welcome to the Mac Observer's Mac Geek Gab, the show where you send in your questions, your tips, your cool stuff found. We mix it all together. We mash it all together. We string it into an agenda. The goal being that each and every one of us learns at least 5 new things every single time we get together. Sponsors for this episode include a long-standing one and a new one, Linode.com/MGG and sunsoil.com/MGG. We will talk about both of those shortly. But here, for now, in Durham, New Hampshire, still, I'm Dave Hamilton.
And here in Fairfield, Connecticut, this is John F. Brown.
How you doing today, Mr. John F. Brown?
Good. Happy Father's Day.
Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's yeah, we record this on Sundays, so that very much. Thank you. Yeah. It's
Yep. I'm actually hosting a small family event.
Exciting. Is this a first of your family sort of intersecting your social circles? Yeah. Cool. Mm-hmm. That's cool. That makes sense.
Yeah. Got all sorts of gifts queued up from events past that didn't happen. So. Oh,
right. That's right. You didn't celebrate your birthday with your family.
Right.
Yeah. Right. You and your family has lots of birthdays that sort of happen in this period we've just been through. Is that right?
Yeah, 3 of us are April, and my sister's not. So
it's not. Yeah, right. Okay. Oh, it's an exciting day. All right. Well, let's get this show on the road here.
Yes.
Yeah. So Scott, you know, we love learning 5 new things, and I especially love it when they're accidental. And Scott says, do you know about the Post-It app from the fine folks at Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, aka 3M? So not only did Scott tell us about an app, but he tells us what 3M stands for. And up until this moment, I had no idea, John. Scott continues, the app is exactly what you think, a Post-it note manager, except this one will let you create groups of notes, write notes out longhand, and then attempt to OCR your handwriting, and it doesn't do a bad job. You can also take pictures of Post-it notes that you have already written, and the app will help you manage those too. It works on iOS and iPadOS, but the version for iPadOS, if you have an Apple Pencil, is really the best way to use the app. It will also sync between devices. It's a really cool app, and the absolute best thing about it is that it comes at my favorite price, free. And as Scott says, free is the best way to not get caught. And when I was digging into this, I thought that it also came for the Mac. Yeah, there's a Mac App Store link and Google Play as well. So obviously the link's in the show notes already, so you folks can check it out. But thank you, Scott. That's great. I already learned 2 things at least. Mm-hmm. So this is good. We're off to a good start. If we can hit 5 in the next 5 minutes, that's it, right? We just get to bail and we're done, right? If we hit our 5 in the first 5 minutes. It's an asterisk in the contract, I think. I don't know, somewhere.
Yeah, I remember using 3M floppies. Remember those good old days?
I do remember those good old days. Yeah. 3M and Elephant were the 2 floppies that we used.
And cutting a notch in the disk so you could use the other side.
With a hole punch.
Fun. Yeah.
You had to do it so perfectly, though, because otherwise you'd cut the disk and then no bueno. But Right. Yeah, exactly. All right. Good. Okay, let's keep moving here. We will go on to listener Matt, who I really need to build a shortcut for archiving these things. Matt says, "Hey guys, I I recently wrote you, where are we here? Yeah, this is the right one. Yep. Recently wrote you about my syncing and backup re-evaluation. As part of that, I also decided I was tired of having such a collection of chat apps and calendars to deal with. You see, I have no less than 5 Google accounts with one calendar I need to be able to do busy searches on. Can't trust that in any of the calendar applications I have tried. Anyway, with a couple Google Chat accounts, 3 Slack accounts, a Google Voice account, and various other things I need for this working from home time of our lives, all this stuff was taking up way too much of my screen real estate. A Google search netted a few options. The winner in my case is an open source app called Biscuit. Basically, I have a single window with all the different web-based versions of the apps I need. It seems to be some sort of modified Google Chrome browser, but it works quite nicely at eatbiscuit.com. It's interesting. It looks like a browser where each tab is sort of remembered and sandboxed from the others. So if you log into a Google account in one tab, the other tab doesn't inherit that login. You get to kind of silo these things. Maybe siloed is, I don't know, sandbox, siloed is probably all the same. But yeah, it's interesting. I kind of like that idea. And again, the same, like he pointed out, the same would be true for Slack and any of those things. Although Slack, usually your logins are consolidated across one account, but even still, yeah. Pretty good. Anything to share, John, on that one?
No.
Okay. Michael brings us he brings us back to something new. He said, since I first heard of Don Melton's scripts for video transcoding here, I thought I would let you know that he has some new ones called Other Video Transcoding. If you haven't seen them yet, I have been using them and they are much faster. And he gave us a link and also an article that Jason Snell over at 6 Colors talked about on it. And he's totally right. Like, yeah, so Don's an interesting dude. Don worked on on Safari for years at Apple. In fact, I think he was on the team that brought us Safari and then maintained it for a little while. So Safari WebKit, very talented programmer. Very he does a Westworld podcast too with Kelly Guimont, and I think he does another one called I forget what it's called, but he used to do with Renee Ritchie. But Don is an interesting dude and a very talented programmer, and he likes to convert his videos to store them in whatever library, probably in iTunes or music or videos library, but Plex works as well with all of his scripts. And he recently has, as of December, and I missed this when it happened, but so thank you, Michael, for pointing this out. And this one uses automatically selects a platform-specific hardware video encoder rather than relying on a slower, like sort of universal software encoder. So if you have a GPU that would make things faster for doing these types of video encoding or re-encoding, it will use it. And it can be, double or even 5 times as fast, depending on what you have and how you'd been doing it previously. So yeah, thanks, Michael. That's good stuff. That replaces the old ones. So very, very cool. John, you want to take us to Bruce?
I will take us to Bruce. Bruce has a nice little thing he told us about regarding encrypting files on a Mac. Keka, Keka, is an app that you can run on your Mac that creates encrypted zip files. Much easier than doing it from the terminal, which we talked about recently. Free from their site or $3 on the App Store. And I checked it out, and yeah, it supports I think 9 or 10 different formats.
Yep.
And it also has in the preferences things that Mac users may want, so you can ignore certain portions of a file.
Oh, I also found it.
Yeah, like ignore DS Store and stuff like that, or the certain forks.
Right.
What else did it have? Oh, and it also had what caught my attention is that zip files encrypting or providing a password. The question is, what kind of encryption are they using? And the thing is, the default, what they call encryption, probably is not like industrial grade, but what you can do, or at least this one actually has a checkbox saying, if you want to use AES 256, which is a good algorithm, hard to crack, you can make that selection as well in the dialogues. So,
cool. That's great. Awesome. Sweet. Thank you, Bruce. We just had a note in our chat room at live.macgeekgab.com from KiwiGraham, who points out that BusyCal, certainly my favorite calendar app, is now available, or the Mac version of it anyway, is available via SetApp. So that's cool. That saves, if you've got a SetApp subscription, that saves you a ton. That's great. I also noticed recently, John, although it happened on April 1st, I'm not convinced that April 1st is the right day to make a real announcement about things that people might actually care about. Be that as it may, the folks at Cloudflare on April 1st announced DNS for families. So Cloudflare's 1.1.1.1 DNS has long been a favorite of ours here at Mac Geek Gab. They do a good job of making it fast and available and all of that stuff. So as an alternative DNS, it's certainly one of, if not our favorite, depending on the day of the week. But they've added 2 variants of it. Now 1.1.1.2, if you use that as your DNS, it gives you the same DNS, except it's got their malware filters in it. And 1.1.1.3 can block both malware and adult content right there. And there are alternatives. So there's the standard IPv4, an alternative IPv4, and then an IPv6 and an alternative IPv6. So you can cover all your bases with Cloudflare DNS if you want to do it that way, which is nice. I've always appreciated that they offer an IPv6 version of their DNS. Not all of the alternative ones do. And that can cause things to sort of leak right on by any of these DNS filters of that sort. So yeah, I was stoked when I found it, and I pointed it out in one of our staff meetings, and everybody was like, "Oh, that's cool. That's brand new. We should write that up." I'm like, "Well, brand new, 2.5 months ago, but whatever. We've had some things going on in the world that may have caused us to miss these sorts of things." John, I don't know if you noticed, but yeah, yep. Listener Alex brings us to. Well, it's WWDC time. In fact, the day that this episode is released, later today, will be the keynote and the State of the Union and all that. John, you and I may wind up doing a keynote and State of the Union sort of thoughts episode, I'll call it. Maybe, but we'll see if that happens. Alex points out that there is a website called WWDC Notes that goes through most, if not all, of the sessions at wwdcnotes.com and summarizes them. So it's essentially, TLDW, right? Too long, didn't watch. And so here's what you need to know about all of these different sessions. And presumably they have all the WWDC 19 ones up there now, which are still very helpful and still very relevant. Hopefully they will also do WWDC 20. So I figured that was good, timely stuff. We will absolutely put that in the show notes for everyone. So good. Yeah, John? Cranking along. Okay.
It's on my calendar.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be interesting. We haven't really talked about any of the speculation, but we don't do a whole lot of that here. But I am curious to see if and how Apple decides to roll out this Intel to Apple or Intel to ARM transition with their CPUs on the Mac. So could make the iPad Pro a very interesting device if it can run Mac OS. So, right? I mean, so we'll see. We'll find out. Yeah.
But they've done it before.
Absolutely. Yeah. Twice.
I remember when they moved away from PowerPC. And I can imagine the discussions between Apple and Motorola where,
right.
They're like, yeah, you don't like our chips? Well, what are you going to do? Like run it on a different chip? And it's like, yeah.
Yeah, that's the idea. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure they've had this in their lab for some time now. They've
been running, Apple chips or ARM chips, depending on what name you want to throw on them, for a very long time in iPhones and iPads and in your Mac, right? An ARM chip exists in your Mac because you have a little iOS device that Apple calls the Touch Bar.
Oh, all right.
So like they're already there, or the touch bar. Yes, maybe, but but the T2 chip, one of those things. I mean, it might both be the same, but yeah. So my Mac too, I guess the T2 chip has it. Yeah. So, all right. We'll find out more and then we'll report what we think about that. Jeremy brings us back to cool stuff found and says, I heard about 2 things from Uncle Leo over at Twit. Thought I would share them. The first is called audiomass.co, and it's a web-based audio recording and editing suite. So that's very interesting. I haven't dug too deep into it, but it certainly looks like it's amazing what we can do in a web browser now is really what it comes down to. And this looks, full featured enough for many things, John. So, yeah, I know. It's pretty crazy. And then the second is another audio editing program, as Jeremy says, with a twist. It's called DeScript.com, and it descripts your audio into text. So it transcodes it, which you can then edit. But when you edit the text, it edits the audio too. So presumably it's the thing where if you'd say, well, let me say that again. What Descript does, like I could go and then edit that text out and it would edit my audio to that point and, boom, we'd be good to go. So that's wow. Very interesting. I know. So 2 cool ones for sure, Jeremy. Thank you for mentioning those. And on the audio front, Dave Ginsburg, whose show I was on this week, actually, I'll put a link to that in the show notes too. I was on his In Touch with iOS show on Thursday with him and Warren Sklar, which was a blast. The Levelator is now in the Mac App Store. Longtime podcasters will remember that Doug Kaye and his team at the Conversations Network, which I think at the time included Michael Gohagan, who was doing the Real Reviews podcast, and we're going back like 14 years, came out with this piece of software that they called the Levelator, which does a lot of things that you would want to do to a podcast in terms of the audio before we get it to you. It normalizes all the levels. It applies compression to make sure that the levels don't go all over the place. It does it in a multi-band way so that you're not getting too much low end without some high end. It like just does all of this sort of very generic processing that you would want to do. And we used it here at Mac Geek Gab for years and even like figured out a way how to script it, even though you weren't supposed to be able to script it. We like extracted it from its package and like did all this stuff. And then finally we moved on to a thing called Auphonic because it was clear that, these folks weren't doing this anymore. Well, recently Auphonic it appears to be still related to the Conversations Network is available in the Mac App Store. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes. I haven't messed with it. I did download it just so I've got it and can kind of keep an eye on any updates that are happening. But yeah, it's fascinating. So yeah, it is good. It is good. Any thoughts on that, John, before we keep trucking here? We've got, I don't know, half a dozen. Yeah. Welcome back, Mr. Cotter. Okay. All right. Let's see. Jim brings us. Oh, yeah. Jim says, I had been looking for a HomeKit editor for a good long while because I've wondered if the Home app has been hiding things from me. Specifically, he says, I was having trouble with a Chamberlain garage door gateway and a Hue hub. Each product has their own view of their own HomeKit data, and while the Home app provides Apple's quote-unquote clean version, he says, I accidentally came across the ConnectSense app while installing a few of their outlets. Lo and behold, the app showed me more of the HomeKit entries than I was able to see by any other means. And yes, there were duplicate entries for both my Chamberlain and Hue hubs that I was able to delete using the ConnectSense app, and it fixed a lot of my problems. He says you can also do value change rooms and stuff. It's not a perfect app, but just something for the toolbox. And he's right. There is like, it would be great to have a HomeKit debugger or diagnostics app or something, because everybody, I think I'm trying to the Eve app, right, from the people that spun off from the Elgato, which is still a company, but not the same thing. But the Eve app is another one of those, but none of them provide like this Common Sense ConnectSense app. One really nice thing is it shows you all of your rooms and their devices in one list. So unlike the Home app where you've got to be like, okay, which room did this new device that I just added? Where is it? I can't find it. And you got to like jump around from room to room. This app shows you everything. So you can just scroll through a list and be like, okay, there it is. Now I want to edit it and put it in the right room and all of that stuff. It would be great. So if anybody knows of any others that to add to the toolbox to sort of see and manage HomeKit data, please, Mac, iOS, we don't care. Send them to us. Feedback at macgeekgab.com. We'd love to share those on the show. So thank you, Jim, for starting this.
Feedback at macgeekgab.com.
I did say feedback at macgeekgab.com. That is correct, sir. The Sonos Move, which is, I think, one of the best outdoor grilling poolside accessories you could get. It is a Sonos speaker. It is wireless. Has now an 11-hour charge, is up from 10. They've figured out some stuff in the software they could do to tweak it. That came from their learnings with the new Sonos Arc that we've talked a little bit about, but we will talk more because I have been doing some learnings on the home theater and Atmos front, and I have some things to share, but we will wait another, maybe only another week. I just want to make sure I get all my facts together. But the Sonos Move, great, like I said, poolside grilling, outdoor thing. It's your Sonos speaker, so it has the ability to connect, via Wi-Fi and be a fully fledged participant of your Sonos environment, including having voice assistant support. So you can either enable the Amazon A-Lady or the Google Assistant in it. It's an AirPlay speaker. So you've got that. And for the first time, it is Sonos's Bluetooth speaker. So you can switch it to Bluetooth mode and take it away from your house and Wi-Fi network, and it still works great. It now comes in white. But it's not the same white, John. And this is the thing I love about Sonos, the same way that I love this about Apple. They tried their normal white in the Move because initially it's in this, it's not black. It's like a gray, charcoal gray. But they tried white and they said it worked great outdoors for a summer season. Like, it didn't fade or anything, but it looked unnatural because nature doesn't provide us with anything that is pure white. So they came up with something that they call lunar white that looks better outside. It looks more natural outside. It looks like a white. But I love that they actually care about this stuff. That it's similar to what Apple does. They're very, very similar companies in that they keep their product lines, very, very concise, and say no to more things than they say yes to. But they're intentional and iterative design and all that stuff. So anyway, that's now available in Lunar White, and I'm excited about that. I don't have one, but I have the old one, but not old, but the other color. That's what I should say. But anyway, there you go. You want to? Synology came out with a thing, right, John?
Yes, they did. Little story on my end here. So I have two Synologies. I have a 918 and a 1618, I think. Synology, some Synology NASs, like my 918, actually have NVMe sockets, so you can put a cache in there. And I remember back, when I got these, I ordered a couple of these SSDs to cache, and so the 918, like I mentioned, had the slot there, and when I went to the 1618, though, Dave, and opened it up, I'm like, where are the sockets? They don't have sockets. What they did have in there, Dave, is a little PCI slot where you can plug in an expansion card.
Sure.
And this is nice. And I think at the time, though, they had two options. One that would give you NVMe sockets and one that would give you a 10 gig connection. And I was like, I'll look into that later. Well, sure. They just released, Dave, a card that does both, the E10M20-T1. Oh, who thought of that? So that's kind of nice if you want to get on the cache and 10 gig bandwagon. You can do it with them.
Yeah, that's cool. And really smart of them, and also speaks to them as a company that thinks about what people with their older products would need, because you could do these things if you just, you know, threw away your old NAS and bought a new one that has these capabilities right there in it. But like, I appreciate that they, you know, think about people with their, you know, sort of longer product lines. I think that's good. That's good. Mm-hmm. Cool. On the NAS front, I found two relatively new features from QNAP. One of them is called Hybrid Mount, which is, they call their hybrid cloud file-based gateway. So what you do is you mount the public cloud storage on your NAS, and then you can attach to that share as a share, right? So via like AFP or SMB, or, you know, however you would attach to that as a share. But it doesn't necessarily sync your entire public cloud, like your Dropbox or, you know, whatever it might be, down to the NAS. It just syncs what it needs. And so, but it shows you as though on your local network, it shows you everything as though it's right there. And when you need it, it goes and gets it, and it keeps a cache and all that stuff. So I thought that was pretty cool that it just sort of manages it. You don't have to install this on all of your machines, and it just goes and everything is there. So I thought was cool. And then another one that they call virtual JBOD or VJBOD, where you can use multiple networked QNAP NAS units to expand the storage space of one. So if you have 2 or 3 QNAP NASs, you don't have to mount them as you know, like shares and manage your storage that way. You just say, great, go that blob of storage across the network on that unit, expand this bunch of disks here, and we're good to go, which I think is pretty cool. So you've got virtual storage pools across your network, which why not? You know, I mean, if you've got a, like, you know, even a 1 gig network is probably enough for most of the things that we're doing, but certainly a 10 gig network between your NAS devices, well, you know, what more do you need? So I thought that was pretty cool, you know. Yeah, so I throw those out there, you know, it's good. One last thing, John, that came up is a couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago, we talked about the Starling Home Hub, which allows you, it's a little, you know, box that you put on your network, and it connects the all your Nest devices, your thermostats, your the things in the sky. I mean, it's not really the sky, smoke detectors, all of that, and CO2 detectors, all that stuff. Nest is not compatible with HomeKit out of the box. I know, it's frustrating. Well, this Starling Home Hub for $89 makes your Nest HomeKit compatible. Now, I had been doing HomeKit compatibility with Homebridge for Nest for a while, but that was a little wonky and it didn't quite give me everything I wanted. We heard about this Starling Home Hub from a listener, and so I got one, and oh my goodness, it is the way to do this. If you've got especially a significant number of Nest things, including, you know, their cameras, like, because, you know, you've got your you know, all that stuff, pull it all in together. You can manage how you want it to appear. There's a web interface for the Starling Home Hub. The setup took just a few minutes. It was really quite simple, and it works. It does exactly what you would want it to do. And I've had it running for, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks now, and I haven't thought about it other than the day I set it up, because I was aware of it and touching it and plugging it in and configuring it. And then every time I edit my Nest stuff in HomeKit, it's like, oh, that's right, I'm doing this because of that thing. It just works. There's no wonkiness that I've experienced or anything. So if you're in that boat, highly recommend checking it out. So there you go. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, man. All right. We have a bunch of questions that I am excited to get to. And the other thing that I'm excited to get to, John, is our 2 sponsors for today. So if it's okay with you, I would love to do that.
Okay.
All right. Our first sponsor today is a new sponsor, and it is Sunsoil at sunsoil.com/MGG. Sunsoil makes CBD oil that is USDA certified organic. I have mentioned on the show before that I've been using CBD for several years now to treat some facial pain that I had from a result of that Bell's palsy that I had. Like, longtime listeners will remember 12 years ago, 13 years ago. I found that CBD really was the thing that dealt with this pain. And lately, I've been using Sunsoil because they came on board as a sponsor and we've been testing it out. I've been using their drops, which have been fantastic. They flavor their drops. I've been using the cinnamon flavored drops. It's full hemp extract, but it doesn't really taste like it. It just tastes like cinnamon, and it works great for me. It really, and it's because Sunsoil keeps it simple. Most of their CBD products have two simple ingredients: coconut oil and hemp, and it's amazingly affordable. A 1,200 milligram bottle from Sunsoil costs me a third of what I pay elsewhere. These people provide all kinds of transparency. You can scan the QR code on the bottle with your phone so that you can see the test results. You know exactly what you have. Like, it's down to the bottle. They're down to the batch anyway. And great pricing. And the pricing gets even better because you can get Sunsoil, who makes pure and simple CBD products at an unbeatable price, for 30% off your first order by going to sunsoil.com/MGG. That's sunsoil.com/MGG for 30% off your first order. Go check it out. Our thanks to Sunsoil for doing what they do and for sponsoring this episode. Our next sponsor is Linode at linode.com/MGG, where you get a $20 credit added to your account to use however you want there with their servers, because you're going to want a server for something. If you're listening to this show, you're either a geek or on the path to becoming one. Chances are you've already got some ideas in mind that you might want to play around with on a server. Well, Linode knows what they're doing. They've figured out all the things you need to worry about when you're building a server, and they just do that. That's their business, right? That's why they do what they do. So, you know, we talk all the time about how they have native SSD storage, and it's all on their 40 gigabit network with industry-leading processors you can pick from any of their 10 worldwide data centers. They have their great cloud managers, so you don't even have to use a command line if you don't want. You just spin up the type of server you want. And we talk about that all the time, and all of that is true. But the reality is you don't have to worry about it because Linode has already worried about it. So just go to linode.com/MGG. You get that $20 credit. Their least expensive server is their Nanode for just $5 a month. So yeah, 4 months of a Nanode that you could use for your $20 credit. Go check it out. Linode.com/MGG. Our thanks to Linode for sponsoring this episode. All right, man. Well, Jedd has an audio comment for us. Actually, Jedd has a question that I think he answered himself, but we'll see to that. So, Jedd, take it away.
Hey guys, it's Jedd in New Jersey. Hope you're doing well and staying safe. I have a question. I may have started this once before, but I'm rethinking it. So I bought an external keyboard and I love it. It has some features that are application specific, and it also glows in the dark, which is kind of fun. But I have a weird caps lock issue, and I'm not sure if it's the keyboard or not, but it feels like, actually, scratch that. I am sure it's the keyboard because I brought it to 2 different machines. Sometimes when I plug in the keyboard and use a specific application, this thing called Avid, which is for video editing, it gets stuck in caps lock, or even sometimes flashes back and forth between caps lock and not. I've contacted the company. They were kind of useless. I let it die because I was busy with work. And so I was thinking that maybe there's an application that can override the caps lock with somehow. I can't fix the hardware problem, and I'm unwilling to spend the money on a new keyboard. So I was wondering if you had any ideas for something that might override my caps lock or disable my caps lock. That's kind of where I'm at. That's where it's turned from kind of a very individual use case to kind of maybe a geek challenge. Let me know what you think. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet, man. And like I said, Jedd answered his own question, because if you go into System Preferences and then click on the keyboard icon in the list and go down to the lower right and click on the button that says modifier keys ... you get to pick which key the computer interprets as caps lock or control or option or command. And that can be super handy to do. A lot of third-party keyboards, I've never seen the caps lock thing like he's talking about, but clearly it's a thing, and Apple has engineered this for it. But I've seen it where option and command, I think, are reversed on some Windows keyboards. And so you just go in and you just change those two, and it's like, yeah, okay, good. And you can even have it, like not apply an action to caps lock if you don't want. So thank you, Jedd, for the question. And also thank you, Jedd, for the answer. So pretty good stuff. Thoughts on that, John?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Well, then we will go to Michael. And Michael asks, he says, I used Sidecar the other day with my new 16-inch MacBook Pro, and ever since I have noticed that the formatting of text on Google's site is messed up in Safari with overlap. And he sent some screenshots, and it just looks like the text is just too big and things are just overlap. It's not fitting on the page. And he says, in the search window at the very top of the A, in Apple only shows up, like things were just messed up. So there were a couple things that are good to look at when you have this. We're still not sure if Sidecar caused this or if it was just a coincidence. Who knows? But every web page you go to in Safari can have separate settings saved by Safari. And they're a little weird to get to. The way I get there, maybe you know of a secondary way to get there, John, is when a web page is up, I click in the sort of white space of the URL bar. I right click there and I choose settings for this website. I don't know. Yeah, you can go to the Safari menu and choose settings for this website as well, if you don't want to have to try and aim your mouse just right. But you get a couple things here. You can choose whether or not to use Reader when, if the site will support that. You can choose whether or not to use any of the content blockers that you have. And for this purpose, you can choose page zoom. And so you can decide whether page zoom is being applied to this particular page, and if so, how much. There's also some controls about pop-up windows and autoplay and camera and microphone and all that good stuff too. So that's one place to look for this stuff. Another place is in Safari Preferences Advanced. About halfway down that page, is an entry for Style Sheet. If you have assigned your own style sheet to your web page, and you can do this if you want I know some folks that want to change the default fonts and things like that. You can do that. But as soon as you do that, things can get really, really wonky on web pages. So making sure that it says none selected gets you back to that default of the, of what Safari has. So those are my two thoughts for this kind of question. John, do you have any thoughts for this kind of question? No. Yeah, it's a weird one. It's weird that it's happening with just one page, which is what brought me to the settings for this website thing. I can't see how Sidecar, that's where you use your iPad as a secondary screen for your Mac. Can't quite see how Sidecar would have caused that, but maybe it's loading the page as mobile only, but I don't know. I don't know. I will say this: most web pages these days are built to be what's called responsive. And that means that depending usually on the width of the page, you can also do it based on the height, but more often than not, it's based on the width. you get a different version of the page, and some elements will be completely gone at certain widths. Some elements will be moved from like a sidebar to a thing at the bottom. And the reason for this is so you can load the same web page on a big wide browser in your desktop, and then also on, a much narrower browser on, say, your phone. And yet it's still the same page. This happens when you go to Mac Observer. It's www.macobserver.com for everybody. We don't have like a mobile.macobserver.com or anything that you're redirected to. But based on the width of your browser actually is making the decision as to how to do these things, because your browser knows its own width. We just send all the instructions down and it decides which of them to apply. So it's possible maybe in this scenario that his browser window got narrowed, and widening it might, open up things. Although Google doesn't generally break. They're pretty good at this whole responsive thing, it turns out, John. So it's probably not it. But just in a general sense, remember that if you want to see what a web page looks like on mobile, you can just take your Safari window and shrink it down. There's also other ways. In the develop menu, you can go into what's called responsive design mode, and then you can actually pick, I want this to be like phone or iPad, and iPad in the, split screen mode, and iPad, like, it's great, but you can just grab your window and shrink it. So hopefully one of those things helps Michael. And if not, hopefully it helps at least, some of the rest of us when we're troubleshooting this kind of thing. I don't know. Any other thoughts, man?
No.
All right. Why don't you take us to Mike?
Mike writes, again, I turn to you as my ISP, Frontier. Support is worthless.
We're happy to help.
They told me they don't support Apple Mail, and I should use their Yahoo webmail. Well, that's silly. Even though their website has instructions for Apple Mail, Microsoft Outlook, etc. Within Apple Mail, I have a continuing problem of not being able to receive mail. After checking all the connection settings to make sure they are correct, I get the message, verify the settings for frontiernet.net. Selecting try again results in the same message. Whenever it does receive mail, I then can't send mail. And the settings are correct. Late Saturday night, I checked my mail on my iPhone and I received my mail. So this morning I checked Apple Mail on my iMac and I could not receive mail. 2015 iMac maxed out in 10.14.6. Attached is a copy of the connection doctor. Any help would be appreciated. I've had this happen before, Dave.
Same.
And it's upsetting. And that you'll, all out of the blue, what I've seen is that out of the blue, I'll get a prompt saying, please enter the password for, whatever the address of the mail server is. And I'm like, why are you asking me this? It worked before. Why isn't it working now? So there are a few places you can look, Dave. And I think he went through all of these here. So one is if you go to Mail, Preferences, Accounts, there'll be a tab, Server Settings. Sometimes there'll be a box that says Automatically Manage Connection Settings. You may want to uncheck that because then that'll let you enter stuff manually. So you could do that, including username and password for the server and the port and TLS and all that great stuff. A second place to look, Dave, is if you go to System Preferences, Internet Accounts. Sometimes you'll be prompted for your credentials. But in this case, here's the final thing to do, Dave. And from what I hear, this was the winner. Your username and password for your mail server is actually stored in your keychain. So if you go to keychain access and then click on the passwords portion, you should, and then you search for your, the name of your ISP's mail server. Like in this case, search for Frontier. Like in my case, I searched for Opt Online. Here's what may happen. You may see multiple entries. For example, when I did this last on one of my machines, Dave, I had multiple com.apple.account.smtp.password and com.apple.account.imap.password entries. So, you know what? Whack them. delete them.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, this seemed to solve the problem here. Now, I don't know why these multiple entries pile up, but I think the reason you couldn't log in is that it was using the wrong set of credentials. Yelling at him about it.
Interesting. And that is synced or can be synced via iCloud with your iOS devices. So that, right. Oh, I hadn't thought about that one. Okay. The thing that came to mind to me is it's possible his mail server limits the number of connections any one account can make in a given time period. And so if you have too many devices trying to check that same mail account, you know, when he said I could check on iOS, but now I can't check on Mac, or I could check on my Mac, but now I can't send on my Mac. Maybe he's hitting some sort of threshold. I don't know what that is for Frontier. I know for a while, Google had a very tight threshold with Gmail accounts, like maybe 2 or something, you know, 2 devices, and was like, but dude, that's not enough. It's not going to happen. I think since they've loosened that, but that it sounds like that also could be the thing. But your point is right about I like that. I hadn't thought about that. This is good. Anything else on this one before we move on?
No, just hope it sticks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool. Bill asks, he says, we have an old first-gen Apple TV that we were using for almost 10 years. Apple recently discontinued that, and now it cannot connect to the internet without looping internally and becoming useless. Seems odd. I didn't think that. I know that they aren't offering software updates, but I didn't. But anyway, maybe he's got a problem with his. He says, not only that, but the latest iTunes to work with Apple TV 1 is 12.6, which now cannot communicate with Apple's servers. Okay. He says, so it's time for a new Apple TV. Fine. He says, but the new Apple TVs don't contain an internal hard drive in the same way that the original Gen 1s did, where iTunes would copy all of its local media to the Apple TV. So is there a way to make over 60 gigs of music, photos, and videos available on one of the new Apple TVs without spending for a monthly subscription to a cloud service, and preferably without requiring the Mac to be powered on and logged in? So the first part is totally doable because you can stream directly from your Mac if you go and set up home sharing. Now, my experience with home sharing has actually been pretty good. And one of the cool things is it will wake my Mac up when it wants to do that home sharing. So yes, the Mac needs to be powered on and logged. I don't know that it needs to be logged in, but probably because I think the music app needs to be running, but maybe not. I forget whether that library is shared when you're doing home sharing. Some things change, but it definitely will wake up my Macs when it wants to access that content. So that might be the answer for you. In fact, it might be the only answer. However, the new Apple TVs do have storage on them, and they allow third-party apps to utilize that storage in a variety of different ways. I know there are some movie apps that will, use it as a cache and that sort of thing. I wonder if using an app, some third-party app to play your music might be the answer here, because then even though Apple's app won't cache all your stuff and copy it locally, could a third-party app? I don't know of any, but I'm hoping maybe somebody out there does, and we can turn this into a bit of a geek challenge. Like that's my only thought on it, John, because at Apple, yes, you can do it without having a subscription to Apple Music, but your Mac needs to be on. It's streaming across your network, not just copying it and keeping it there locally. So, and Brian Monroe does point out in our chat room at live.macgeekgab.com that home sharing does not require the music app to be launched because it's a system service. So, and it's not baked into the music app, or AKA iTunes anymore. So thank you, Brian Monroe. That's kind of what I thought, but glad to have that confirmed. But yeah, other than that, I don't know of a magic answer here. Any thoughts on that, John?
No.
Okay. All right. Cool. You want to, I guess we have a tip from Harvey here that I somehow baked into the middle of the question. So let's go with it.
All All right. So Harvey says, about a week or two ago, out of the blue, Safari stopped playing YouTube videos on my iMac 10.14.6, iMac 27-inch 2017. Not always, but almost. Just a blank screen or a blank screen with a message that the video could not be played. I've attached the screen recording. All right. But they play just fine in Chrome and Firefox. I thought I'd share with you and possibly your listeners how I solved this problem. A solution I stumbled upon in the course of writing an earlier version of this email. For the record, Flash is set to off, YouTube is set to never autoplay, and changing that setting did not correct the problem. I fixed the problem in Safari Preferences, Websites, Content Blockers, where I changed YouTube from on to off. YouTube must have flipped the switch that blocks blockers. He used Ghostery Lite, which
okay. Yep.
I guess is considered a blocker now.
Yep.
So there we go. So
that's
thank you for so that's the place to look if you can't play your YouTube videos.
Fascinating. Yeah, YouTube, it's interesting, all the things that can cause YouTube to be blocked. We had a problem, and we talked about it on the show, but where the safe search, I had in my Synology router, I had safe search enabled network wide, and that blocked certain YouTube videos from being played. I think if they had any like explicit language, even just one incident of it in like a video, like my daughter couldn't watch any of her vloggers or anything. It's like, so we had to turn that off. It's different now being in a house with 4 adults, so it's not quite like it was 10 years ago. So yeah. Yeah. All right. Dan asks us, a little bit geeky, which is good. We like that. He says, I have a 27-inch late 2015 iMac, 16 gigs of RAM, and a 1 terabyte Fusion drive with a 24 gig SSD, so the small SSD version of the Fusion drive. He says, the drive is about half full. I'm running Catalina. Things have been slow at times and normal at others. I've run things like Etri check multiple times. Sometimes it shows everything is good. Other times it can report problems. I've been thinking about replacing the Fusion drive with an SSD. But before making that leap, I'd like to get your thoughts if that makes sense or not. I've thought about getting an external SSD, which I would be using for backups anyway, and try booting from the external to see if I notice enough changes to make it worthwhile. My concern is that this Mac has Thunderbolt 2, not 3, and USB 3. Couple of questions. Is there an external SSD with a Thunderbolt 2 connection? Would Thunderbolt 2 as a startup disk be a valid test compared to the internal Fusion drive? And is an external SSD using USB 3, would that be a valid test with the Fusion drive, or is that too slow? So all good questions. So the sort of the general answer is yes. Booting from that external SSD would be a very good comparison. And quite frankly, depending on how comfortable you are with, extracting and suctioning your iMac screen off and all of that, that may be enough for you. Like, you may be finished at that point. And there's nothing wrong with that inherently anyway. It's not internal, but I don't know how often you're moving your iMac around anyway. So, as for that SSD, external USB SSDs can be great. The beauty of USB SSDs is they don't end your Thunderbolt chain. So you can hang them off of, well, if you hang them off of your Mac, they generally do end the chain just because they don't generally have pass through. But if you have a dock and then hang USB off of that, you can be in good shape. Thunderbolt 2 devices aren't in great supply right now. And I get all choked up thinking about this. But it's good news because Apple makes their Thunderbolt 3 to Thunderbolt adapter, which is bidirectional, as we found out recently. And that means that you can plug Thunderbolt 3 devices into your Mac if you do it right. You got to look at the Apple, look at their website. We'll put a link in the show notes so that you see how this bidirectionality works. It has a USB-C, aka Thunderbolt 3 port on it, and then a USB or a Thunderbolt 2 mini DisplayPort jack on it. So male Thunderbolt 3, female Thunderbolt 2. So you've got to think about how that's going to work. A lot of people are using these with Thunderbolt 3 docks. So you get a cable from your Mac, goes in, and now you can connect all kinds of things, including even faster USB SSDs, right? So Thunderbolt 3 dock. And now you've got the capability to add, a USB 3.2 or whatever we're going to call that. But, a 10 gig USB drive off of that. That might be the best solution because now you've kind of opened up your world and you have another Thunderbolt 3 port if you pick the right dock, like the OWC or the CalDigit dock. And then there's a new one coming from Anker that I haven't messed with yet, John, but it looks very similar to the CalDigit one. So, I have high hopes, and hopefully next week we can talk about it. Hopefully they'll have gotten one out in time. But that would be the path I would take. That machine is not that old. It's 5 years old. If it's fast enough for you, it's going to be fast enough for a little while. I would wait until we hear from Apple what the next version of Mac OS is going to support before you invest money in prolonging the life of your 2015 iMac. But you probably know that before you're hearing this show, since there's only going to be a number of hours between its release and your path. But that's kind of where I would go with this. So I think that answers all the questions. What do you think, John?
Yeah, that's not too convoluted.
It's a little convoluted, but it really isn't bad. It's just hang a Thunderbolt 3 dock off your Mac and go wild from there. It's really kind of the TLDI. Didn't interpret, didn't understand TLDU. I don't know. Any more thoughts on that, John?
Nope.
Okay. You want to take us to Ian then, my friend?
I will take us to Ian.
Sweet.
Ian says, I'm upgrading some drives in a Synology and wondered how you would go about wiping old drives. Usually I would use Drive Genius with 3 passes, but recently someone told me that multiple passes are a useless, pervasive myth. And he has an article that says as much. So, okay. Which you can read. So 1 pass of zeros will suffice, especially seeing as it was a SHR, Synology Hybrid RAID, member. I don't really like smashing it up option, as that's just e-waste, would prefer to recycle. At least what I've done, Dave. So, if a drive was part of a multi-drive RAID array, SHR, or some other type of RAID, then the way the data is distributed among the drive, and we had a spirited discussion about this in the past, but the way that the data is distributed would make it very difficult for someone to obtain a useful data off of the drive. Not impossible, though. If you're a Synology guru or a RAID guru, maybe you would be able to get some useful data off of it. But I wouldn't make that assumption. I, like him, whenever I retire a drive, like if it's starting to go bad or something, I would just use disutility, has a similar option. So if you go in disutility and you click on erase, there's going to be a security options. And actually, Dave, they changed this from the past. So if you look at it now, it has the first option is fastest, where it doesn't write to the entire drive. I think it just, clears out the directory entries.
Sure.
But then they have one to the right of it that does something a little different. It says it writes random data and then it writes 0. So it sounds like it does 2 passes. So you could try that, or whatever is in Drive Genius, that does a single pass. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Smashing the drive. I mean, another option, like you may have seen videos of this, they have these big drive shredders, or, some people say, well, open the drive and, scratch the platter and that'll make it so people can't pull data off. But, that's what I do, just to take the option that does the least amount of writing. And also, speaking of Drive Genius, I haven't used it in a while.
I was going to say Drive Genius. Does that even, where are we with Drive Genius? I haven't heard from them in a while.
So we got to talk to them. the thing is, Drive Genius 5 was not fully Catalina compatible, but I went to their site and apparently Drive Genius 6 is. So
Aha.
We go,
right? Yeah. Who knew?
Go to them.
Yeah.
But I tried running 5 and actually, it lost the key or something like that. So I wasn't able to look at the Drive Genius option.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll reach out to them. That's great. Drive Genius 6 supports Catalina. Who knew? All right. Well, hey, these are things. Good. John, in the last episode, we had a conversation about whether or not we should set our cable modem passwords to anything from the default, and we got a lot of feedback on this. So you want to summarize this for us, John?
I think I could. So so we had a number of people. Bart, who with our friend Allison does a security podcast. He wrote in. Alex also wrote in and sent us a couple of articles. And who else? Yeah, Bob. So we had a number of people that were very clear on this. You want to, on your router, you do want to set the username and password to something other than the default. Yeah. Now, our speculation, Dave, was, well, why does it matter? You're the only one that can get to it, right? And the answer is wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree with that on the router for sure. And we were admittedly unclear last week. We were talking about cable modems that are only cable modems, because that's what you and I use. But lots of people use cable modems that are also their router and Wi-Fi gateways and all of that stuff. And absolutely, if it's doing your routing and therefore has settings that you can change, then absolutely you do not want that at any kind of default password.
Right, because what can happen is a malicious web page, which web pages can run code like JavaScript. Somebody could write some JavaScript that finds your router, because the address of a router is probably somewhat predictable.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah. Not totally, but yes, definitely somewhat predictable. Yes.
Yeah. But you could have a piece of JavaScript that, goes to the router, opens up a network connection. And here were the two attacks that were brought up. One was that they could spoof your DNS, is that if they change the DNS, which is typically a thing that a router does, you could be going to a place that you shouldn't be, or someone redirect you to a different DNS. And the other thing is that they could install port forwardings.
Right. Oh, yeah, for sure.
So those are two pieces of really bad news if it happens to you. So. Right. Yeah, for sure. Huh. Yeah. No, this is it. I'm glad that we're doing this here. It's everybody was right about this. Now, some of the folks that wrote in pushed a little further beyond just the router and said, even with your cable modem, you really should change the password. Now, again, I still don't see a huge security risk there, because if somebody can log into my standalone cable modem that does no routing whatsoever, there literally are no settings to be changed. In some modems, the worst thing you could do is trigger a reset by software. So it would just reboot your cable modem. That's an annoyance, but it's not, I suppose you could argue there's a security risk there, but it's not a huge one. It's just like, okay, rebooted, it came back just the same way. And this is by design. Your cable company does not give you the option to change any settings in there. They do not want you messing with it, because that's their domain, right? They reach that far into your network. Beyond that, it's all yours, but that's theirs. So, and it's so that they control the speeds and things like that. So, but look, changing the password from a default is not a terribly bad thing. Like, my concern last week was, unless you know what that password is, like and I think it was Bart even who wrote in and said, look, just write it down on a sticky and paste it
to the outside of your cable modem. Like, that's fine. No malicious web page can read what's on the side of your cable modem, presumably. You know, and then that way it sort of solves the I forgot my password problem. But even if you do forget your password on a cable modem, like, all you're going to do is factory reset the thing, and your cable company is going to see it when it comes back online. It might take a little longer, but other than that, you know, nothing else is going to change. So yeah. If you like, these are these things where it's like, if your eyes completely wide open and you truly know how your network is, you can make these shortcuts. And this one is definitely a shortcut. And be totally okay with it. Like you and I, John, I'm not worried about your network. I'm not worried about mine. I'm 100% aware of these risks. Hopefully now everybody listening is aware enough to make this choice for themselves. But the safest answer in all cases is yes, change from the default password. And those of you who wrote in and said that are absolutely correct on this front. So, yeah. Good.
I mean, use a password manager. To remember this password, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Some of these passwords for cable modems, I've seen them as like the HT access style passwords, which password managers don't always help with. But I mean, it does, because it won't auto enter it doesn't mean you can't just store it in there and then go look it up. Like, that's okay, you know. So yes, use a password manager for so many reasons, including this. So thanks to everybody that wrote in. Yeah, you're all correct on this. Yes, absolutely. All right, let's get a little geeky here, John. Not that we aren't already, but let's change the geek focus. Let's expand it a little bit, maybe circling back to something we addressed in Cool Stuff Found. Robert writes and says, I'm currently running my Plex server on a 2017 iMac 3.4 gigahertz quad-core Intel Core i5 with 8 gigs of RAM. Attached to the iMac, I have a Gen 3 Drobo 4-bay. He calls it a NAS, but that's not correct. That's just a direct attached storage device with multiple bays for all of my Plex media. Okay. He says, my question is, I'm thinking about buying a Synology NAS like the DS1019 Plus. We'll talk about that because there were brand new Synology units that came out this week. Do you think there would be enough performance gained from having a dedicated Plex box to justify the cost? Or would I be better off just letting my iMac be the server to do the heavy lifting? So the answer is that even with the new Synologies that came out, your iMac has a faster processor than what you and I are going to get in a Synology NAS. We've sort of addressed this in our discussions about virtualization, John, on the show, where we found that, the Synology, you can virtualize things there, but the CPU isn't really there to be a compute server, right? That box is built to be the storage server.
I was looking, some Synologies. So they have different processors. So
absolutely.
The one that they have is the Celeron and the Atom,
right, in
their low end units, and those are both they're on the low end of Intel's product line in terms of performance. So while you can run a VM on them, now the other thing is Synology does have units that have Pentium and I think Xeon processors. If I was going to do virtualization on a Synology, getting one of those,
So here's the thing.
You may get acceptable performance.
Yeah, that is true. Absolutely. But you're going to pay through the nose for that server because of the CPU that's in it. And that's why I said that the NASs that you and I and most of our listeners would buy for our homes and small offices are not targeted to be compute servers, right? They're targeted to be storage servers with some compute power. Now, for a Plex server, it's a little bit different because a lot of what Plex does can be accomplished with hardware transcoding. And that is baked into most of these new NASs that are out there. So, for example, I am running the one that he mentioned, the DS1019 Plus. That's what I'm running. You're running essentially the same thing. You're running the 4-bay version of it. I think it's the 918 or something, right, John? Is that what you got? Yeah. Same CPU in both of ours. It's just one more drive bay. That's the only difference. Well, basically the only difference. I think RAM can be different, but I think we're both at 8 gigs, so that part's the same. But you know, that is, and that up until this week, that has been my recommendation of, if you need a NAS, you get the DS1019 Plus. You've got 5 bays, you've got a 4-core processor, can boost over 2 gigahertz, and you know, it's got the hardware encoding, so you can do all the Plex stuff. But you're not going to be doing any you know, real compute tasks. Yes, it will do some software transcoding when necessary, and it can handle that. So for what you're doing, you may be fine, Robert, moving to your Plex processing to a Synology. By and large, though, you are going to a device with less compute power, not more. But it might be enough because it's sort of tailored to be doing that particular job, in that you may not notice a downgrade in performance, even though technically it is a downgrade. Now, as far as the virtualization, and even if you want, like, I know some folks that listen run Plex on their iMacs because they want the compute power to do, you know, heavy duty transcoding. Like, they just want to throw these, you know, 40 gig MKV files at it and have it offline transcode those down to, you know, different size things so that they can easily, quickly transfer them to their mobile devices. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you want heavy duty computing power like you would have in an iMac, and quite frankly, like you would have with Don Melton's scripts that we mentioned earlier in this episode, right? Like, those would be perfect for this. Your Synology, you know, your small office, home office Synology NAS is not built to do that. Just like it's not built to do compute serving for a, you know, for like virtualization. But here's the thing. So you could, like you said, John, buy a NAS, and QNAP does better in this regard in terms of building NASs that are meant to target that person that wants to do virtual memory, or virtualization, not virtual memory. However, the cost delta there, and the same is true for the Synology stuff, perhaps even more so, the cost delta there, you'd be better off buying a Mac Mini, or if you don't care about it being Mac OS, buying, like, you know, some other type of computer to be your compute server, and then use the NAS as its storage server from across the network. So you can store all your stuff on the NAS. You could even use iSCSI if you want, so that you're sort of tricking it into thinking it's local storage and, you know, treating it differently and formatting the way the computer wants. But there is a far more efficient and cost-effective way to get to having a virtualization server with gobs of storage and gobs of processing power than trying to bake it all into one box from a NAS vendor. If you're willing to split it into just 2 boxes, you can do way better from the compute side of things and from the cost side of things too. So that's kind of the enlightenment that I had this week, John, as I was digging into this stuff. It's like, right. You know, it's like, why? Like, I want it all in one box because that's cool. But is it really the most efficient way to go about it? Prob's not, you know. So, you know, does that make sense, man?
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, we still have time. We're going to keep trucking. Oh, I do want to talk about these new Synology units, though, that came out. So they came out. They are trying to simplify the product line. They're getting there. So there are 4 that were announced this week. They all end in 20 plus, meaning that they are faster things. That's what the plus means. And 20, meaning they were released in 2020. There is the DS220, the DS420, the DS720, and the DS920. The first 2 are a 2-bay and a 4-bay. The 220 is a 2-bay, 420 is a 4-bay. They have dual core processors in them. Okay. The 720 and 920 are also a 2-bay and a 4-bay, but they have 4-core processors in them. So that 920 And maybe the 420, depending on what you want to do. They both have the ability to do hardware transcoding and that sort of thing. So, you know, you're probably okay with either one. But I would not. I'm very careful recommending a 2-bay NAS to anybody. The extra $100 and so that you're going to spend to maybe $150 that you're going to spend to jump from the 2-bay version to the 4-bay version, so the 420 or the 920, is so well worth it. With a 2-bay NAS, you are losing one of those drives, so half of your storage, to fault tolerance, to that redundancy, right? With a 4-bay NAS, you are losing one drive to fault tolerance. That means a quarter, not half, if you put 4 drives in. So for the same amount of effective storage, it might in the end actually be cheaper to get a 4-bay unit and fill it with, you know, smaller drives than having to buy a 2-bay unit and fill it with these monster drives just to get that kind of storage. In the end, it might actually save you money. It does give you more efficiency because you're actually able to use the striping benefits of RAID to get the higher read speeds that you just don't get with, you know, a mirrored drive, because you're just reading from at most 2 places instead of 4. So the 420 or the 920, I would lean towards the 920. Personally, I'll wait for what would like, if they're, I don't know this, but I'm just speculating based on the past, John. I like a 5-bay NAS. That just seems to work for me. So my guess is that would be the DS1021 Plus next year, because the 920 came out this year, the 918 came out 2 years ago, the 1019 came out last year. So I'm guessing, you know, but for now, yeah, that 920 is the one I'd recommend. So what do you think, John?
Look good to me. Okay.
All right, cool.
So I'm happy with what I have.
Yeah, and same. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the CPU boost in these is, I think it's about 15% faster than what we've got in the 918 and the 1019 Plus. So for listeners out there, if you can find a 1019, you know, and the price, I don't know, I haven't looked, but if the prices on those have come down, that's certainly a thing to think about. Yeah, when I saw these, it was like, oh no, do I need to have, like, you know, do I have FOMO now? And I looked and it was like, well, no, only a little bit, you know, like I'm not interested in needing to replace it. And all of them except the 220 have the M.2 SSD slots that we were talking about before for the caches, which is great. So, so yeah, there you go. Let's go to David. David asks, no, wrong one, David. There it is. I'm in the market for a new 24 or 27-inch monitor. I'm connecting my 2018 MacBook Pro. Charging is not a big deal. Is there any advantage to a USB-C port over an HDMI port, which will require a dongle on the monitor? So some of these monitors that connect with a USB-C port or a Thunderbolt 3 port include a dock inside the monitor, right? Which can be a totally helpful thing. Otherwise, no, as long as you're getting the resolution and the refresh rate you want, and I would say 60 hertz at a minimum, and I'm pretty sure your Mac will do 60 hertz over HDMI. The interface does not matter. So, you know, in terms of that, I've on the newer Macs, I think I've bounced back and forth between HDMI and like DisplayPort or whatever. And again, as long as the machine or the, you know, the dock or whatever supports that 60 hertz refresh rate, I've been fine with either one. So, you know, but you might like having that dock in there, and it sounds like, you know, that would be your dongle as opposed to having to get an HDMI type, you know, dongle thing or whatever. But if you've got a dock, it might already have that HDMI port, and then things get easy. So I don't know. Thoughts about that, Mr. Braun?
I got one of each.
Okay. Right. Yeah. You got that Mac Mini with port. You're, you know, swimming.
So I got HDMI with that. And then my other monitor is a DisplayPort off of my OWC dock.
That's right. You're running the OWC Thunderbolt 3 dock. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I like that one. So I've got in front of me here too. They do a good job with that dock. They do a good job with everything they do. They're obsessive about this stuff. Okay, so a different listener, David, suggested a thing. We were talking in episode 817 about various different browsers and what they were based on and that sort of thing. And in a conversation that we were having with him, he said that he appreciated using the Edge browser, the Microsoft Edge browser, because it's getting vertical tab support later this year. And he says, I'm looking forward to vertical tabs as I typically run 100+ tabs open in a browser when I'm working on something, and they all end up just being little squares with icons in them, and I don't know what they are. Where with vertical tabs, I can just scroll down the list on the left side of my browser, which is what I do in Firefox with a vertical tab add-on. And that piqued my attention because I am someone who likes to have my dock on the side of the screen because my screen is wider than it is tall. And so it's the height of my screen that I am constantly battling with. And if I could move my tab bar from the top of my screen to the side of my browser window, well, I'm swimming in space, comparatively speaking, going wide. So why not? I don't use Firefox. I use Safari, and I haven't been able to find a plugin for Safari or an extension for Safari that moves the tab bar. I don't think it's possible, but this is pretty cool. And he found one called Tree Style Tabs as an add-on for Firefox. So I probably should have saved this as cool stuff found, but that's okay. We will get there. So Tree Style Tabs for Firefox gets you those vertical tabs. What do you think about vertical tabs, John?
Nah.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe I'll try it.
Yeah, it's something to try, right? Like that's exactly it. Yeah. In 816, we were talking about screenshots, and we shared a quick tip where you continue holding down the space bar, and you can drag the screenshot, selection window around. Well, listener Jeff says, may I recommend a far less cumbersome alternative? Apple's built-in now into Catalina screenshot application, which is found in Applications Utilities, but you can also launch it, or the important parts of it, with Command-Shift-5 is how that comes up. This lets you draw your selection window and then move it around. This functionality is just baked into the new screenshots functionality in Catalina. So you draw your box, you move it around, you position it, you resize it, you get it exactly the way you want, and then you hit capture, and guess what? It captures. So thank you, Jeff. Yes, you're absolutely right that is probably a more a less cumbersome and more elegant way to do that. So thank you for that, man. Let's see. What else do we have here? I feel like we can squeeze in a couple more of these tips, John. Yeah? All right. Okay. We'll do one more. Maybe two. I don't know. We can get through these if we clean up the list. In 817, we were talking about the app the monitor upon which an app appears. Now, you and I use the old style of things, and so monitors in the dock and everything are sort of fixed in place, and that's why I'm able to have a dock on the left side of my screen, because it's not jumping around from screen to screen. And Allison wrote in and said, I heard you guys talking about this and whether or not to use spaces on multiple monitors and where to put your dock and whether to have your menu bar on both monitors. She says, I have the dock visible on both displays and the external set as the primary monitor using displays preferences and dragging the little menu bar to the external display. But every once in a while, the system gets confused and a new app launches on the internal monitor instead of the external. I'm not sure what boogers it up, but here is the solution. Access the dock from the primary display and drag up or down on the separator at the far right before the trash can icon. This will change the size, so you might want to reverse direction to get it back down to the size you had before. But your apps will now open on the display where you modified the dock. So that's interesting. So that's how you set, which is the primary display dock, whatever, is just adjust the size of that dock. Fascinating. Fascinating. I don't know. That's crazy. Allison did say she couldn't find where to tell macOS whether or not to have the menu bar on both displays. That is a function of choosing spaces on one display versus, spaces as multiple monitors. If they are, then you have the menu bar on both. If they aren't, then you only have it on your main display. So that's fascinating. I like it. All right. And since we're talking about the dock, we will take Steve here. And Steve says, I was recently listening to one of your shows from almost 2 years ago and a couple of recent shows where you were talking about using the dock in multi-monitor mode. I use Keyboard Maestro to open my applications and set up my desktops by application type. I have a 27-inch monitor as my primary display, and my MacBook Pro is a secondary display. When I got started with this configuration, my dock seemed to randomly move from one display to another. It was very frustrating, and I was at the point of contacting Apple when I discovered, quite by accident, that by moving the cursor to the secondary screen and pulling the cursor to the bottom of the screen caused the dock to move to that screen. Doing the same on the primary screen does the same. So it isn't random. It's one of those hidden gems in macOS that really helps once you know it's there. So yeah, going to the bottom of the screen, presumably you have your dock on the bottom of the screen, will jump the dock and follow you. So that's cool. I like that, Steve. All right. John, I think we've exhausted our time for today.
Yes.
Do you feel the same way? Yeah.
Well, I got to, I got
you got peeps coming over.
Well, not places. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting. It's good. It's good. Well, thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you for spending your time with us. Thank you for sending in all your questions, your tips, your cool stuff found. We so appreciate it because that's what makes this show what it is. You know how to find us. We talked about that. If you're a premium listener, premium at MacGeekGab.com. We will almost certainly be back with maybe a shorter show in midweek just to take 20 or 30 minutes and sort of share our thoughts so that we're not waiting a week and B, not packing next week full of all of that, a week later. So we'll figure out a time, John, and we'll stream it live. So yeah, of course, because that's what we do now anyway. Thanks to CacheFly at cachefly.com for providing all the bandwidth to get the show from us to you. Thanks to all of our sponsors at, of course, sunsoil.com/MGG, linode.com/MGG, smilesoftware.com/podcast, macsales.com is where other world computing is, barebones.com, and eero.com/MGG. John, did I miss anything?
No.
Okay. Cool. Well, I guess that's it, right? There's nothing else to say. Oh, wait. There's always one more thing to say.
Oh, right.
Right? And that is, have fun. Enjoy watching the keynote, if you haven't already. And don't get caught.
Made on a Mac.
All right, and we're out. Exciting.